After 30 years of being locked away, Sammy Davis Jr.'s secret vault was finally opened, and everyone in the room froze. Inside were diamond-studded treasures, unheard music, personal letters from Martin Luther King Jr., and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in uncashed checks. But these weren't just random items. Each one carried a story Hollywood has kept in the shadows for decades. And to understand why this vault was so important, the story has to go back nearly a century to a kid from Harlem who turned the stage into his entire world. Sammy Davis Jr. was born in Harlem, New York in 1925, and honestly, his childhood was nothing close to normal. He didn't grow up with toys, school buses, or a quiet home life. Instead, he grew up on the road, traveling from one city to another with his dad and uncle, who were both part of a vaudeville dance act. His mom left when he was very young, so the stage basically became his second home. He learned to dance before he could even write his name. The 1930s weren't easy for anyone, but for a young black kid in entertainment, it was even harder. America was going through the Great Depression, which meant jobs and money were tight. Audiences were smaller, pay was low, and people were picky about who they paid to see. On top of that, racism was everywhere. Some theaters wouldn't even let black performers use the same entrances as white ones. Sammy learned early on that talent alone wasn't enough. You had to work twice as hard and keep people's attention if you wanted to survive in show business. But Sammy had something rare, insane energy and charm. Even as a kid, he could win over almost anyone with a smile, a quick joke, or a fancy dance move. He didn't just copy other dancers, he developed his own style. His dad made sure Sammy was around all kinds of performers, comedians, singers, magicians, so he could pick up new skills. And that's how Sammy ended up being a triple threat before he was even a teenager. By the time Sammy Davis Jr. entered his 20s in the 1940s, America's entertainment industry was still heavily segregated. It didn't matter how good you were. If you were black, there were limits to what you could do. Clubs would hire black performers to sing or dance, but they wouldn't let them stay in the hotels they performed at. Sometimes, after getting huge applause on stage, Sammy had to walk out the back door and sleep in a completely different part of town. Las Vegas, which would later become his second home, was one of the worst. The city's casinos welcomed black audiences for shows, but black performers weren't allowed to gamble, eat in the restaurants, or even walk through the front lobby of hotels. It was a slap in the face, and Sammy knew it. But instead of walking away, he made a plan. He would become so valuable to these places that they'd have no choice but to change the rules. Sammy's performances weren't just good. They were unforgettable. He sang with emotion, he danced like his life depended on it, and he made people laugh between songs. Crowds loved him, the word spread fast, and soon audiences weren't just there for the big names. They were there for Sammy. And when a casino realized that guests were booking rooms just to see him, things started to shift. One night, Frank Sinatra, who had become a close friend, stepped in and demanded that Sammy be treated like any other headliner. That pressure worked. Sammy eventually became the first black man allowed to stay in certain Vegas hotels, breaking an unwritten rule that had kept entertainers like him out for decades. By the late 1950s, Sammy Davis Jr. was no longer just a solo act. He was part of one of the most famous entertainment groups in history, the Rat Pack. The core members were Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, Peter Lawford, and of course, Sammy. Together, they owned the Las Vegas Strip in a way no one else ever had. If you went to Vegas back then, a Rat Pack show wasn't just a concert. It was an event. The guys would joke on stage, improvise songs, and even poke fun at each other's personal lives in front of the crowd. Behind the scenes, their world was even wilder. After their late-night shows, they'd head to exclusive parties filled with Hollywood stars, politicians, and even royalty. The Rat Pack had a certain kind of power. If they liked you, you were in the inner circle. And if they didn't, well, you'd probably never get invited to anything important in Vegas. Sammy's position in the group was unique. He was the only black member, which was a big deal in the early 1960s. Some people didn't like seeing him on stage with white entertainers, but Frank Sinatra made it clear Sammy was his brother, and anyone who had a problem with that could stay away. That loyalty gave Sammy a kind of protection in an industry that could be brutal. In the mid-1950s, Sammy Davis Jr.'s life changed in a way no one expected. He had been in a terrible car accident in 1954 that almost killed him. The crash was so bad that he lost his left eye, and for the rest of his life, he wore a glass eye. While recovering in the hospital, Sammy had a lot of time to think about life, death, and what he believed in. It was during this time that he started talking with friends who were Jewish, and their faith really spoke to him. Sammy had grown up Christian, but he felt a personal connection to Judaism because of its history of struggle and survival. He related it to his own experiences with racism. To him, Jewish people had faced discrimination for centuries, just like black people in America. He saw a shared fight against prejudice, and that inspired him. In 1961, he officially converted to Judaism, which shocked a lot of people. Some thought it was a publicity stunt, but it wasn't. It was deeply personal. The conversion wasn't easy. He learned Hebrew prayers, celebrated Jewish holidays, and embraced the traditions. But it also meant he was now dealing with anti-Semitism on top of racism. Some people in Hollywood did not like it, and in certain places, he faced double the discrimination. But Sammy stood firm, saying that Judaism gave him a spiritual home and a sense of belonging he hadn't felt before. He once joked that being black and Jewish made life extra complicated, but behind the humor was real truth. It made him an outsider in more ways than one. Still, he didn't back down. He wore his Star of David necklace proudly on stage, even during Rat Pack performances. In 1960, Sammy Davis Jr. did something that shook a lot of people. He married Swedish actress May Britt. Now today this may not seem like a big deal, but back then, in 1960s America, interracial marriage was still banned in many states. Even in places where it was legal, a lot of people openly hated the idea. Sammy and May weren't just a couple in love. They became a target for ugly comments, hate mail, and even threats. Some newspapers covered their wedding as if it were some scandal instead of a celebration. Sammy knew exactly what he was walking into. He had been warned by friends and even some people in the entertainment industry that marrying a white woman could ruin his career. And in some ways, it did hurt him. Right after the wedding, he lost gigs, especially in the South. TV appearances were canceled, endorsement deals were pulled, and certain casinos didn't want to book him because they were afraid of losing customers. But for Sammy, this wasn't about making a political statement at first. It was personal. He loved May Britt, and he wanted to be with her no matter what the world thought. Of course, by going through with the marriage, it automatically became political because it challenged one of the biggest racial taboos in America at the time. Whether he wanted to or not, Sammy became a symbol of defiance against racist social rules. The marriage lasted 8 years, which was actually pretty long considering the pressure they were under. They had a daughter together, and for a while, they managed to build a family despite the constant outside noise. Looking back, a lot of people say Sammy's decision was brave because he didn't hide who he loved, even though it cost him money and opportunities. Others see it as proof that he lived life on his own terms, no matter the risks. If you only looked at Sammy Davis Jr.'s career highlights, you'd think he must have died a billionaire. The guy performed with the Rat Pack, he had hit songs, he acted in movies, and he toured constantly. But the truth is, his finances were a roller coaster. Yes, he made millions over the years, but he also spent millions, sometimes faster than he earned them. Sammy loved the good life. He had multiple homes, expensive cars, designer clothes, and a taste for throwing lavish parties. He was also extremely generous, often lending or giving money to friends even when he shouldn't have. The problem was, all that spending added up, and Sammy wasn't always keeping track. On top of that, his accountants didn't always handle his money the right way, and the IRS was quick to come after him. By the 1970s and 80s, Sammy was deep in tax debt. We're talking millions owed. At one point, the IRS even started seizing his assets to pay off what he owed. Some of his prized possessions were auctioned off, and he had to keep working well into his later years just to keep up with the bills. In movies, he stood out in classics like Ocean's 11, alongside his Rat Pack brothers, where they pulled off a cool Las Vegas heist with style and humor. He also starred in Sweet Charity in 1969, playing a smooth-talking character that showed off his charm and acting chops. Even though he could act in serious roles, Hollywood often gave him parts that leaned into his comedy, dancing, and singing. His music career was just as big. Songs like The Candy Man became huge hits, the kind of tunes that get stuck in your head even decades later. Another one, What Kind of Fool Am I?, proved he could handle emotional ballads that made people stop and really listen. He could go from a happy upbeat song to a heartbreaking love song without missing a beat, and that range was rare. Over the years, Sammy got the recognition he deserved. He won awards like the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and his performances earned him respect from some of the biggest names in entertainment. Even younger artists looked up to him for breaking racial barriers and proving that showbiz could be for anyone with enough talent and determination. By the time he was in his later years, Sammy had built a legacy that couldn't be ignored. For most of his career, Sammy Davis Jr. seemed unstoppable. Always on stage, smiling, dancing, and giving 110%. But behind the scenes, his health was taking a hit. Sammy had one major habit that caught up with him: smoking. And not just a few cigarettes a day. He smoked up to 4 packs daily for decades. Back then, smoking was common in showbiz, and Sammy often had a cigarette in his hand even while performing. By the late 1980s, the damage was done. In August 1989, doctors diagnosed him with throat cancer. It was a crushing blow, especially because his voice was his most important tool. The doctor suggested surgery that could remove the cancer, but would also take away his voice box, meaning he'd never sing again. For Sammy, that was unthinkable. He refused the surgery and chose other treatments instead, even though the chances of survival were slim. Despite his illness, Sammy kept performing as much as he could. He didn't want people to see him as weak or sick. But by early 1990, his health declined fast. Friends and family gathered around him in his final weeks, knowing the end was near. And on May 16, 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away at his home in Beverly Hills at the age of 64. After Sammy's death, there was one thing people couldn't stop talking about: his vault. No one really knew exactly where it was for years, only that it existed and was supposedly filled with personal treasures. Some said it was tucked away in a storage facility in California, while others claimed it was hidden in a private home. The truth was, the vault stayed locked for 3 decades, untouched. Part of the reason was legal drama. After Sammy died, his estate got messy. The IRS, creditors, and family members all claimed parts of what he left behind. There were arguments about who owned what, and the vault became part of that battle. Nobody could open it without the proper legal rights, and until all the disputes were settled, it stayed sealed. The mystery made people curious. Rumors spread that inside could be unreleased recordings, rare jewelry, or even gold bars. Some said there were private letters from famous figures that could change how people saw Hollywood history. Others imagined it was just filled with old clothes and props. When the vault was finally opened, the first thing that hit everyone was the smell, a mix of dust, old leather, and history. Sitting in the middle were several old leather suitcases with SDJ stamped on them. They looked worn but classy, like something Sammy would carry while traveling between shows. As they started going through the contents, the team found stage costumes, including the iconic tuxedos Sammy wore during Rat Pack performances. Some had sweat stains from long nights under hot stage lights, making them feel like living artifacts. One of the most surprising finds was a stack of personal letters from celebrities, politicians, and even world leaders. Among them was a signed photograph from Martin Luther King Jr. with a handwritten note thanking Sammy for his support during the civil rights movement. Digging deeper into the vault brought up some truly unexpected treasures. One of the most striking items was a diamond-studded Star of David pendant. It sparkled under the light and was clearly something Sammy wore proudly as a symbol of his faith. There was also a private diary, small, leather-bound, and filled with unfiltered thoughts about Hollywood, racism, and personal struggles. Reading it felt like stepping directly into his mind, with moments of humor, frustration, and deep reflection. In another box, there was a collection of novelty gifts from Frank Sinatra, including a gold-plated cigarette case engraved with an inside joke only the Rat Pack would understand. It was a glimpse into the playful friendship they shared. But one of the most shocking discoveries was a pile of uncashed checks from the 1960s. Some were for appearances, others for royalties, and together they added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's money. Now, more secrets like this are still out there, so stick around because the next one might be even crazier. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.